So normally, even from my personal experience, I started to experience learning education when I saw my own son कि इसको किस तरह का education देना है, what I have done, what kind of education I have received, what right now I am doing, and there is no connection. हाँ? जो प्लान किया था वो प्लान के मुताबिक हो नहीं रहा है, something else is happening. So when it comes to a cognition of a child or a learning process of a child, what do you think is a way through which a child uh, can learn or engage in activities which is the right way?
See, one very important thing we must understand is that learning is not a choice. This is what the Western notion is about. You can choose you can learn. You have no choice about what to see. What you're looking is what you're seeing. So as long as your senses have no choice, your learning is not choice. So whatever the child is experiencing is what the child will imbibe and become that. So in an environment in a rural tribal environment where there is respect for the child, where nobody is teaching, whereas everybody is learning, the child will naturally awaken to its inherent potential for learning. Whereas when the child is in the modern environment, because the modern people are teaching the child and disrespecting the child will imbibe that. The child will think that they are incapable, that they need to be taught to learn. But of course, in the initial stages, they will try to resist. But with all kinds of mechanisms, we are convincing the child that they need education. So naturally, the child will begin to feel inferior and begin to learn. And as they learn, they will start feeling that they have learned now. But this is all a myth, actually. Because learning, as I told you, is a biological aspect of our, and there are certain determinants in that. It's not that, that manmarji, So if you want your child to learn, you be a learner. That's the most important thing. Second thing, very fundamental difference between modernity and tradition is that, or indigenous or illiterate and literate is that, illiterates are process-oriented people, whereas modernity is product-oriented. And the first product being knowledge. Knowledge as a product is what we engage with, But if you look at the illiterate communities, it's always a process. In the sense, they're constantly observing, and in that observation, knowing happens, and it keeps on getting upgraded or corrected, So it's a flow. Knowledge that way is a very temporary existence, and it keeps upgrading or correcting. So that is what actually learning is. So this process orientation is now almost gone away from modern life. Also, the physical environment in modern life is anti-child. Because see, a pro-child environment is when you start using the ground, not when you have furniture. Because the moment you have furniture, then you are creating an environment where children need your help to sit. Understand? The moment you start using the ground, you start cooking in your house, you do a little bit of farming or cutting vegetables. All that you do in front of the child, meaning the child is there. You don't have to purposely perform. That's not what I mean. Child will naturally navigate towards activities that are happening around. Everybody says this example, no? When the moment children come out of the school, they ran out, and whenever they see anybody doing something, they will stand and watch that. It could be just a mochi repairing the shoes, but a little bit far away, a teacher is reading a book. Nobody is going to watch that, no? But there's nothing to be seen. So processes is something that the child needs to see. And the process of life is something that needs to be seen, because life is process. So in the modernity, actually most of the things are misunderstood, especially the notion of play and toys, because they've fragmented all activities, one singular activity of a child into play, learning, working, art, and learning. All these are, and they are given specific time and specific space. Understand? But for a child, for life, there is only one activity, which is to understand the world. And it is done playfully. That is the play element. And it is done with total involvement. That is the aspect of work. And it is done in a certain way, which is the function of beauty. Even art is completely misunderstood idea of modernity. See, modernity has completely taken all bodily activities into mind. Beauty is something that you feel, not what you think. But take anybody into a modern art gallery. Do you think they will feel or they will think? Yeah, that's what. So everything is shifted into the realm of thought. So the body is completely neglected. Actual functioning of beauty is completely misunderstood. So if you actually leave the child completely free in the sense that not in the modern environment of television and mobile phones and all that, but in an environment where activities are happening like maybe carpentry, cooking, somebody doing farming, people doing meaningful activities, that is where the child can really thrive, because the child is constantly seeing phenomena happening, explorations happening. A carpenter is making something, a potter is doing something, a weaver is doing something, a farmer. Everywhere, when they are able to see things happening, that is the logic of life. The processes are happening. And this seeing also includes how plants grow, how it grows, how it gives fruit, how it dies, chicken, dogs, wherever life is happening. See, as I told you earlier, we are coming with a potential only, human beings. You have to live life, learning from life itself, life happening around you. A person living near the desert will lead a completely different life than somebody who is living in the jungle or on the hills or near the sea. So it is the context that shapes us. It makes us, the knowledge is given by that, the sense of beauty is given by it, the value system is developed by that. Why in Kutch water is preserved so much and not near the sea? So the whole value system is based on that how do you live? Not telling lies and all that. Now, there's all a strange modern notion. You see, again, the notion of lie and all that, it all belongs to the realm of language. Body doesn't lie. What body sees is what body sees. Where is the question of lie there? In fact, a child, when the child is born, I say that the child is born in truth. In truth. But the child doesn't distinguish between, child doesn't even know that there is something called truth and something called lie. This dichotomy itself is brought in because you through language you tell them that there is something called truth and something called lie.
Yeah. And can we go back to the 90s or 1991 when you came back from the indigenous communities? And then can you share some of your life's experience which added to your journey of understanding this?
Actually, in 93, I came to Kerala to work with a group of potters. And pottery had completely died there. Hardly anyone was doing, about, big community, about more than 100 families. And so I went and somebody invited me there and I began to work with these potters. By then, I had understood very clearly that working with artisan is to actually learn from them, not to teach them anything, but to create an environment where they begin to create things. So I always had doubt, understood that I am there to learn from them. They are culturally far more superior. So I initiated a fantastic process there. And within that, we were able to produce extremely beautiful, very highly original products because of this kind of approach. I also began to work with the potter's children. And in one workshop, That was in 2003, during April-May holidays time. I did a workshop called Sensing Nature, Knowing Nature. And I had repeated some of the exercises I had learned when I was studying at NID, something to do with, color and all that. But without all those rules, So I made a very different exercises, but connecting children with the world, with what is happening around. And what they created was absolutely beautiful and of very high standard. This is when I realized that we have completely misunderstood the real potential of children. And around that time, I was also blessed that I was able to adopt a child. And so when she came to my life, I had decided 3 things: never say no to her, always follow her, never lie to her. And that was very crucial because that actually gave me an opportunity to actually see what the child's natural beingness is. So combining with all this, I began to go deeper into understanding the role of beauty and cognition. So beauty, once I saw this girl from a clay slab. With a knife, she was scooping out circular plates. And I found that she is able to do fantastic plates with no effort, no unwanted focus and all that. No? She would just take knife, cut it and bring out circular plates. I began to wonder how this is happening, how naturally this is happening. Whereas at NID, we had spent almost 6 months learning to draw circles, perfect circles. I was wondering, where did she go to learn this thing, That's when it began to realize that beauty is, again, like an internal mechanism that if you don't disturb it, what you do becomes beautiful. The reason why when you go into rural tribal communities, you find beauty is because it's not an effort. What you do is beautiful. And why it is destroyed in modernity is because we have fragmented every activity and turned all activities into the activity of the mind instead of, an integral activity in which body and mind function together. So when I realized beauty is biological, I also realized cognition is also biological. Because this is also an effortless activity that, that is enabling people to understand the world, like every other living being. How a dog learns, in order to understand where it is situated, I didn't see at a core level no difference. Complexity changes, like a dog will not have a Bengali bark or a Malayali barking. So naturally human beings have far more flexibility, but that doesn't mean that we are much superior to them. Because it also gives us far more responsibility, because if we take a wrong step, it can be far more destructive. And that is what is happening in the modernity, that we have taken an unwise step of not understanding how language should be learned. You see, if you look at the human history, there are 2 fundamental biological changes that have taken place in our system. The first was millions of years ago when we shifted from raw food to cooked food. Because biologically we are equipped for raw food, not for cooked food. But for some reason we started eating, and I'm sure our body must have rejected it because our biochemistry, I'm sure, was not ready for a cooked food. But it must have taken thousands of years for us to change our biochemistry. Now maybe cooked food may be more difficult. For example, raw meat, maybe it's not even unthinkable, And maybe our body might also reject it right now. But so we have biologically adapted to that. So that's number 1. Second thing was, when literacy came into a picture on a large scale, without thinking about how that is going to impact our biology, we began to use it. So with coming of literacy, denial of senses began to take place. We stopped using senses and we began to use senses as a tool of the mind. So, so the body became unimportant, senses became unimportant, language and mind took over the whole modernity. So this is actually the denial of biology within us. Yeah? And actually, this is the whole problem. Crisis of modernity is nothing but denial of life, and continuously depending on man-made things. Yeah.
So any kind of structured approach in learning is dangerous.
Absolutely. Structure is already inherent in nature. You see, for example, our mother tongue. Isn't there structure in that? We are not making that structure. So there is structure already inherent in life. You don't have to add another structure. Same thing if you look at how learning grammar destroys our learning language. Na? It's the same thing. So but there is a natural way of understanding the world. And there is a system. The way that there is grammar, there is a rule for learning language. There is also a rule for learning the world. And it's very simple that you look at any object. Every object, for example, you think of a house. There is a form, what you see. There is a function. There is a process of making it. There are materials involved in making it. There is structural stability. And there is a context. Am I right? These are 6 aspects of any object. Object has a form, what it looks like. It has a function. There's a process by which it is made. Materials involved. Structural stability and context. If you actually don't interfere with what children do, all activities children do belongs to either of this, either in any of this category. That if you remember in childhood, you must have made a house using just the book. By keeping the notebook in a tent-like form, you have called it a house, am I right? And 95% of people have done it. Second thing is that you must have put bedsheet over a table and played house, which means you're exploring the function. Keeping, taking chair, table, pillow, bedsheet, all that kind of stuff, you must have made a house, which is a process of making, right? And when you sit on a sofa, bouncing is an activity that every child does because of the softness. And why is every child doing it? And you will find that materials are explored very spontaneously by children. That's material exploration. And the other two are natural in the sense that when you make a house perfect, structural stability is established, And of course, it is happening in a context. That's a given thing. So if you don't interfere with your own silly toys and your idea of play, whatever children do is playful, and every object is a potential toy. Every object is a potential toy. That is why they are not fixated on a product. Any object can be used as anything, provided there is some kind of correlation. So this is what I studied. When I studied whatever activity children do, I found that wherever they are, if they are left free, there is a clear correlation between their context and what they do. And this is repeated everywhere in the world. Every child will do this only. So this is a structure given by life to understand the real world. Form, function, process, structure, materials.
Say, for example, in case of mass education, so according to you, there should not be any concept of mass education.
Absolutely no. It's all authoritarian processes. You see, in order to establish authoritarian processes, education is very important. In a democratic process, there shouldn't be this kind of education. You see, even though people have all kinds of ideas about caste system, to me, if there is no hierarchy within the caste system, that's the best way to live a life. If there is no hierarchy. I want to again underline that point. If there is no hierarchy, caste system is the best system. Precisely because, you see, learning is actually a bodily process. And if 7 generations have learned one thing, the body has acquired the ability for instant learning. In the first generation, the body has to make an effort to understand and learn. Are you getting my point? But within 7 generations, every generation is repeating the same activity, same pottery or any activity, then the body has already known what to do. Are you getting my point? This is something that is proved in many experiments. This belief exists even in Indian, traditional Indian culture. I came to know this in a very different way. One day I was walking with my potters in Coimbatore, completely different place. And when we were going somewhere, few people were coming opposite to our direction. So this potter friends told me that they are potters. So I was wondering how they told, no, they walk like potters. We know that they are potter community. So when I went there, I asked them, I found, yes, they were potters. That is when I began to actually consciously observe people in different artisan communities have a different style altogether. Like a carpenter has a different way he holds the body. A kanchari, a brass smith, or a goldsmith, or a stones carver. Everybody has very different bodies. So the body is actually completely trained to acquire certain skills. And actually, to me, all these were universities of independent universities. Understand? And potter, and also other very important. See, if you look at today's situation, there is hardly any life skills that anybody in the modern education knows. Hardly anybody would know how to farm, how to cook healthy food, not the silly cake and all that kind of nonsense, that everybody will know now, but that is coming from the West. But a simple dal, chawal, what is the right food to eat? Hardly anybody knows, which is something that 3 generations ago, everybody in this culture knew. What is the right food, when to eat, what is which season, which food should be eaten? Who knows today?
It's all mixed up.
So it's something that is so alive, something that is so aligned with sustaining of life is completely traded off with this silly Western knowledge, which is absolutely harmful. You look at the situation in the Western countries. See, today we claim that we are living in the most scientific times, but we are living most unscientific life. Am I right? So what is this contradiction you're talking about? Knowledge-wise, we seem to claim that we know everything scientifically. But in our life, nothing is reflected. And look at the tragedy of modern educated fellows. They don't even know how to parent their children. So they attend parenting workshops. And this is the biggest tragedy, the biggest crisis of a species. That if a species doesn't know how to look after its own children, they should go out here. They shouldn't be staying anymore in the world, of course, the time is ready, actually, ripe. It'll go soon.
So, what is your idea of a society then?
Well, I always think in terms of children. What kind of life a child should have? That's my key point. Well, it has to be in the midst of nature. It can be even desert. What I mean by nature is not man-made. It can be desert. It can be ice, like Eskimos. I think they must have lived a much better life than, anybody living in a city. See, nobody complained that it is so cold, na? And hardly anybody would have complained that in the desert that it's too hot, because our bodies know how to acclimatize. But not today. Today, we are against everything. That when it is raining, we are against rain. When it is hot, we are against heat. That's the state of a modern man, na? So, I think a community which is established in farming, that's the most important thing, established in farming. Sustainability is about food. If you don't have anything else, we will survive. The only most primary requirement is food. And you tell me how many people know anything about food today. So society that is established in food or farming is a must. Without that, there is absolutely no chance of future survival. Of course, modernity is going to provide you with chemical food, factory-made food, which has no substance, which has no quality. People don't understand quality is what is important, not quantity. So food as quantity is what is being provided. Even if they call it vitamin and all that, it doesn't have a quality of life that is more fundamental, you know. A society in which nobody says no, a society in which, no, you also take just a family, let's forget about society. I think, I feel that 17, 18, 19, 20, before that, you must start having children. No doubt about it at all. Because that is a prime time for...
At the age of 17, 18.
Absolutely.
Any particular reason behind that?
Yeah, because that is the time you're ripe. You're ready. You're physically ready. Right? That's the time. Then, you must have at least 3, 4 children. 5 children is also fine. Because children need more children. That's the rule. Single child is a tragedy. Single child will selfish. Everybody will focus their attention on the child. Children do not need any kind of attention. So children need other children. Children don't need adults around them. So that is rule number 2, more children. Other thing is that, so when you get married in the age of, by 20, 21, 22, you become a grandmother by you are 40. You become a great grandmother when you're 60. So this child, every child will get an opportunity to engage with various generations. It's very, very important. Intergenerational learning is this, nothing more than that. Today we talk about this, but where is the other generation nearby? 4 generations minimum should be staying together. 4 generations. It was there all this while. It's only because now some silly Western idea has crept in, this whole thing is completely gone. Now your grandfather, at the age of 50, you're having your child. 30, 40, 50, what's the point? Then you're actually looking at, this is my grandfather or father? And the child, of course, you're painting black, so it's okay. You see? What a tragedy, yaar. Completely confusing the child. So completely we have gone wrong in all these aspects, And nature will take its own course here. If there are more, balance of, all that, nature will take care of. Or you don't have child at all. That's another option. But don't have one and all that, And don't stay in nuclear families. Very harmful. As many people as possible, different age groups, the child should be able to see. See, when I look at a child in my village, a child on a particular day, the child will at least meet 40, 50 different age groups on a single day. In a month's time, the child will experience one death, one birth, one marriage. You see? So all the process of life has to be experienced by the child. Today, the thing is that when somebody dies, parents are asking, should I show the child somebody die? I mean, what nonsense here? Child should see everything that is happening. Something has completely gone wrong with modern minds, educated modern minds. You see, the thing is that we are all responding from all kinds of ideas generated by the mind. If you stop using our mind, body will tell you what is life. It is only body that knows what is life, not the mind. And 99% respond everything because they have read many books. Stop reading. Trust your body. Start using your senses. There are fundamental damages that modern education has done to you. Really fundamental damages.
Okay. Now, let's get into a kind of subject which is quite important. When we talk about children, there is somehow this idea of school education comes in. So what is your take? Naturally, we have got the idea, it's dangerous, but I want to go a little deep into it. What is your take on school education for children?
They are not understanding that teaching itself is the problem. It's not what to teach. Teaching, the act of teaching is damaging children, because their natural tendency to learn gets disturbed by this. So if you want your child to learn, you be a learner. Simple equation. You know? Actually, what schooling does, I think, if we can look at it a bit more carefully. See, in the classroom, our body and mind begins to learn two different things. The body learns the teacher. The mind learns what the teacher is telling. What that means is that body experiences what is happening. So the authority of the teacher, the anger, the love, whatever the teacher is doing, the tension the child is facing, competition, all that experiential aspect that exists in a classroom is imbibed by the body. Because the senses are constantly giving inputs. You know, I'm seeing, no, eyes are seeing the teacher, and you're making a calculation. How was the teacher today? Huh? Understand? Huh? So the other aspects minus the subject is something that learning is already taking place. You know? So the whole body, the whole being is primarily engaged in that. How to please the teacher, how to escape today's punishment constantly, or how to please the teacher. In order to do that, only other learning takes place. So you learn physics because you want to please the teacher. Because actually, if you ask 95% of the people, educated people today, most things they have learned are forgotten. Most things. But the body has imbibed all the experiences. The body won't forget. Because what you are today is nothing but reflection of everything that you have experienced from your young age. So the mind and body split basically happens because the mind is learning what is being said, taught, and the body is learning what is happening. That is one major thing. Second thing is that when you are made to believe that you're an educated person, superiority complex come into you without your knowledge. That's other thing. And cognitively, the damage happens because your natural learning process, which is the ability to create knowledge and comprehend, is completely damaged. And the other drawback of ready-made knowledge is that, you see, the ready-made knowledge is, you are given ready-made knowledge, a finished product, which is comprehended, meaning which is organized. Such an information when comes in, then the body's role is nothing but, the mind role is nothing but to put it in the head, store it. So there are two ways of storing. One, either rote memorization or organized storing. So reasoning is used nothing but to store that information. But we think we are creating understanding with that. Understand? So what happens is that the original process of understanding completely gets killed. The original process of understanding is like this, that all the assorted different kinds of information that each and every sense is giving, including the language, it's all inside the body. Inside, I don't know where it is. It's all, that is what gets organized on its own, which is called self-organization. You are not organizing with your ego. It got organized and it is given to us whenever it is required. Like the way I'm speaking, my language is coming out. I'm not making any effort. It's just a flow. And that is true with any activity when you're involved in. Because the whole being has learned it and it is available. So, because you're using language to understand, at a certain point of time, the teacher will ask you to make comparisons, which is the mind will make comparisons between, like you begin to argue or agree. You agree or disagree. So that kind of process is developed in you, within you. So then knowledge becomes a matter to be argued, to be defended, agreed or disagreed. Understand? This is purely because it is a linguistic process. But when it is a sensorial process, there is nothing to argue, nothing to agree, nothing to disagree. What you see is what you see. When you see a river, when you see anything for that matter, there is nothing to argue upon. There is nothing to disagree upon. Why in indigenous communities there is no argument, disagreement is because they are all rooted in observation. And they make a clear distinction between information and knowledge. Whereas we don't have. Modern educator doesn't have difference between, information and knowledge. Of course, they make some silly stories around it. In the indigenous communities, knowledge is that which is experientially known. So when an information is given, for example, I'll give you one example, that there is a saying that when a bird creates its nest on a certain position in the branch or certain side of the tree, rain will happen at this particular time or from this direction, something like that. Right? And it keeps changing depending upon the. So this is an information, and when the farmer begins to observe this and verifies it, that is when it becomes knowledge. But it is not ready-made in the sense that each year the farmer will have to observe, because each year the bird might change. Maybe the height. Heavy rain means it will be down. Low rain means the nest will be on top. Understand? Na? Which means this alertness, this observation is demanded every day from you. Whereas in modernity, we are completely mechanized our systems because we are carrying ready-made knowledge. It doesn't require any observation at all. There is nothing that you have learned that had demanded observation. You are made to believe that, and it is nothing but superstition. Modern education is nothing but superstition. It's a belief system. Whereas in indigenous communities, even though we think they are superstitious, that's not true at all. But they're constantly observing. So, what is superstition and what is belief needs to be very clearly understood here, no? Even if it is science, if you are made to believe it, it's superstition. Science doesn't blanket, in that sense, doesn't become science because it is called science. Science becomes science when your approach to understanding that is scientific, which is open, which is exploratory, which is to be held with doubt. Then you are an explorer. That is what scientific means. Not because you know everything of science. That's a believer in science. A scientific person is also a creative person. There's no distinction actually. Someone who's observing, who's able to hold out, that is a scientific person and an explorer and a creative person and a playful person. Because this is another term that is being fooled around everywhere, playfulness. And everybody is made to play, physical play. Absolute foolishness. Playfulness is playfulness of a quality of the mind. To be playfully exploring. Because they also have this idea, out of, what is that? Out of the box. And none of these people are worrying about how did you enter into the box. They're only talking about out of the box thinking. Because then our assumption is that by default we are in the box. So this box is nothing but ready-made knowledge. That's what it is. The mind. Ready-made knowledge is the box. So whoever is not trapped in this ready-made knowledge is never in the box. So modernity, by that very system, is trapped in the box in every way because you get educated.
So now coming to the point which you always try to establish कि हमें बच्चों को प्ले से दूर रखना है, मॉडर्न प्ले से दूर रखना है एंड प्ले ग्राउंड से दूर रखना है, टॉयज नहीं देना है. सो कैन यू जस्ट इलैबोरेट ऑन दिस? व्हाट आर योर रीजंस ऑन दिस?
First of all, play must be understood from the point of view of why do children play? So it's actually, as I told you earlier, playfulness is what children are all about. Any activity they do, are done playfully. They're eating, when they get some kind of a, eatable they can put it in the finger. So every time you see that children are exploring everything very playfully. And the other very important thing that I find today, which is extremely harmful, is that adults are playing with children. And to the, now the West has produced something called play workers. Someone specifically trained to play with children. I think this is all extremely dangerous and anti-child activities. You see, the most important aspect of children is that the way their mind works, their system works, is not the way that our mind works. Because we are so individualistic. Children's mind is not like that. When children play together, 5-6 children come together and play, it is as if they acquire one mind. So they are not individuals playing together. They become one and play. That's why there is very, very less conflict when we don't interfere. See, the thing is that in modern situations, there are conflicts because right from childhood, you've destroyed their beingness, which is universal. You made them into so individualistic and selfish that children will refuse to give anything. Because, see, how you make them selfish is very simple. When you give them something, you say, this is yours. In a rural situation, there is nothing that is given to a child and told it is yours. But everything in the house belongs to them. Whereas in modernity, what we do is that it's very clear demarcation. All this belongs to me, all this belongs to you. This room is yours, this room is mine. You see? So mine and yours is established by this process. So naturally they become selfish and possessive. But in a rural tribal belt, this is not there at all, because possessiveness is not, conditioned. These are all conditioning. This is not natural at all. Because child by nature is very, very loving. That's the nature of the child. And the child doesn't feel that this is mine, this alone is mine. For the child, everything is mine and nothing is mine. That's the way. Because it belongs to them only when they pick it up. You see the difference, no? So, you see, there is something called swarm intelligence, which means when birds fly together, it's as if one intelligence is being used. This is true of children also. This is true of indigenous communities where ego is not built to fragment. This is very difficult for a selfish, individualized, modern human to understand because their system has been fragmented and made into selfish beings. They are made to believe that they are individuals. Whereas in an indigenous community, this individuality and collectivity is held together. The self and selfless. And that is what non-duality is all about, actually. So, actually, it is one of my brother's son who made it very clear to me, because he also had not gone to school for 12 years. So one day he was telling me that, I was actually telling him something about play, and then he told me, no, look, I will tell you one experience I had. So there is a small pond in the farm, and there's a tree nearby, just next to that. And 6-7 children were on the tree, and they are imagining that this is a huge sea in which they are on a ship, and the ship is sailing. Now, all the children there, within that, all are thinking, they're already established that this is a sea and this is a ship. There's no conflict. And they are all now together going. And then somebody is saying, look, there is an island there. And everybody is seeing the island. There's no conflict. You understand? Now, this kind of establishment, this kind of oneness of the mind is not possible when adults come in. Because modern adults come in with their individualistic mind. And they also use their mind for all the game that they play. That is not the way children play at all. You see, one thing should be very clearly understood. Children are contented most of the time. When they get angry, within few minutes, few seconds, they go back to normalcy. When they cry, if you don't go there and start pacifying the child and all that, then they will prolong the cry. Suppose you don't go there, they cry, within something they happened, and then immediately they forget and they start playing. If there is a fight between two friends, it will be resolved soon, and they within minutes they are back to play. All this is prolonged when adults come in and interfere and create problem. They come with all their silly exercises these days, non-violent communication, all that kind of nonsense that the West keep producing, and the Indians to keep making card games. That's a new thing, cards. I don't know what is wrong with these educated Indians here. Anyway, so the child, so this beingness of unselfishness and selfishness together, this universal mind, meaning the collective mind, these are all things that get completely destroyed in the modern context. Whereas that is the reason why we shouldn't be playing with children at all. Children should play together. And I have many documentation on this. I have a very interesting video of 7-8 children together making a temple. Different age groups. Nobody is directing. But everything is getting formed in a very beautiful way. And you see, so I was sharing this with a friend who was telling that in modernity, what we have is subordinated coordination. Subordinated coordination. Whereas in indigenous communities and among children, there is something called coordinated cooperation. Nobody is purposely doing it. Now, this is very clear in my own work with potters and all that. I have seen this quite often. How they come together and do certain work, and they don't use commands. There's no language being used to tell you do this, you do that. It's a work that is happening together. And for example, loading pottery on the this thing lorry when they want to transport. So 4-5 people are standing here and there, and they are throwing from here, cleaning, all that. Nobody is giving any instruction. Nobody is giving any command. It's just happening so smoothly. So people, who are not individuated and damaged, cognitively damaged, they function as one when demand arises. I think there are, I don't know about this. I don't have any proof of this, but I've heard this, that when in women's hostels, that the menstruation, somehow begins to happen on similar dates. It comes nearer. It can be, friends together. I don't know. I've heard about this. So there is something that is beyond the mechanical mind, mechanical understanding, that our bodies are able to correlate and, engage and do.
All right. So I'm now quite curious to know because you are involved with a lot of design school, what exactly you do in the design schools?
That what design schools, that is a foundation program, needs is the reorganization, re-understanding of how actual learning takes place vis-a-vis how teaching takes place. The whole difference between learning the word and learning the world. And by then I had really done very deep work with children and non-literate communities, artisans, and to understand what is about real learning the real world, how to create knowledge. So the foundation program in design and architecture demands that you learn how to learn the real world, because it is based on experience. It is rooted in experience, creativity, beauty, and all that. No, so I began to offer courses that looks at all this in a very, very different way, because my learnings are from indigenous communities and children and not from the West. So understanding the damages that the Western education does, I began to offer courses. So one of the courses I offer is called reorientation program. That is from learning the word to learning the world. How to address the damages that modernity has given us, how reasoning, arguments has to stop, how to start using your senses, observation, that kind of program I've began to offer. And the other program is on beauty. There is a course called Basic Design or Elements of Design, in which they teach the rules of making things beautiful, no? That these are the elements, principles, all that kind of stuff, no? And they use books as resource. So in the initial phase, I shifted from books to nature. Look at nature and learn from nature, various elements of beauty. But now I've shifted even this, and I have now begun to offer this in a very, very process-oriented way, where I don't teach them elements and principles at all, but I take them through a process by which the students begin to articulate what are the elements and principles that constitute beauty. Why something is beautiful. So it is a fantastic process, but it demands that the student is 100% involved, because there is nothing to be taught. So unless the student is involved in exploring, co-exploring, then you become a collaborator. You learn together in decoding what is beauty, what are the elements that create beauty, what principles are involved, and things like that. So I've been actually looking at how to get back senses, and also other course that I've been offering is something called Culture and Cognition, in which I take students to the rural tribal areas to make them understand how illiterate communities learn. Because the notion that has been thread is that we have to help them out, So to make them understand that learning from a illiterate perspective, how does an artisan learn, or anybody for that matter, illiterate person learns. So I try and shift them their understanding from learning the word to learning good. So all this is basically about reclaiming the senses, reclaiming authenticity in sense of beauty, and reclaiming the natural cognitive system in which we explore the world, observe the world, and create knowledge of the world. So,
okay. So, sir, with such a huge research for last 30 years, you have almost devoted your entire life to understand how children learns. How do you see, what kind of a expectation do you have from the parents' fraternity, from the education fraternity, or from the people in general, how to take up life and what they can do towards the learning process of children? That I want to understand. As an individual, for last 1.5 hours I'm talking with you, I'm just trying to figure out from today what change I can bring in my life. From tomorrow, what change or what discussion I need to do with my wife. And from day after tomorrow, मुझे अपने बच्चे के साथ क्या करना चाहिए. Taking the learnings from you, understanding, discussing, and also doing my own research to find out कि मुझे कितना करना चाहिए, ये सारा सब कुछ. तो how do you want me, for example, to start thinking from tomorrow?
Actually, we offer something called Do Nothing Parenting Workshops. And how our parenting workshop is very different from other usual workshop is, the whole focus is on the parent, not on the child. What we say is that the child is perfectly fine. It is the parent who is creating all the problem and the conditions that are creating all the problem, not necessarily because the parent is responsible, but the parent is innocent and doesn't know. They are well-meaning, but they do not know some fundamental aspects of what is life, how child learns. So what we tell them is that offer an environment where you do least conditioning to the child. Remove toys, start using the ground, have processes in the house, allow children to use all the rooms, So when they are able to function completely naturally, then slowly your unlearning will happen. See, the problem when people use deschooling, unlearning and all that for children, that is absolute nonsense. It is actually the parent who should unschool, undo the damages that schools have done to them, and don't impose that on their children. So for that, it is the parent that has to undergo the process of change, and the best person to learn from is the child. So you reverse the process, reverse the from whom one should learn. So the child is going to learn you, that there is no choice. But do you want to be a teacher or do you want to be a learner? So, but in order to learn from children and in order to not to condition the child, you have to create a non-conditioning situation in the house. So naturally, less furniture and try and do physical activities, in the hand. Those are, I think, the most important things that one should be doing. And it's also very important that more and more collaborations should happen. Many parents should come together and start, creating a network throughout the world. And I think there has to be a demand for fresh research on children, because all the research that is happening is for conditioning and is for destroying our autonomy and natural propensities. In fact, I have been trying to establish a cognition lab, which is to, initiate a fresh research on children, and it has met with deaf ears. Hardly anybody from cognitive scientists or anyone for that matter has responded positively to take up a research, to understand how children learn. It's very common sense to say that literate learn the word and illiterate learn the world, and that all living beings are learning beings, except the modern educated. So these are facts which doesn't need further exploration. So I don't understand why is it that at least in India, which now is claiming to be the next leader, still imitating the Western paradigm is something that I don't understand. At least from here or other countries that who wants to, when they say they are decolonizing, what is it they are decolonizing? Have they began to explore that how knowledge is created? Or, So that is the way I'm looking at future. There has to be a fresh research on cognition in children. What is knowledge? Why knowledge? And whole issue of sustainability, consumerism, capitalism. All that needs a fresh, research.
Okay. So I think now we can conclude this episode, this podcast, and there is a lot of scope that we can come back, because this is something which is very new to a lot of people. Even after working for 30 years and you were talking on your research about your learning throughout your journey, wherever you are going, through all the possible means. So, thank you so much, sir, for sharing your research, your life, your journey. And I hope the listeners will at least listen to this, take some time, absorb, and then they can come back and choose what they want to do.
Actually, they can look at some of the website, our YouTube channel. So because there are a lot of documentation on children and all that. So that may be...
Absolutely. So what we will do in the description of the podcast will include the website and also the link to the YouTube channel. So that will help a lot. Okay, sir. Thank you once again. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. And I wish you good health.